Welcome back, Inebri-art. This is Andy, and this could be the last episode I record in this office. If you haven't heard yet, we're moving offices. It shouldn't affect anything, but hopefully it doesn't cause a hiccup in our production schedule. But today I'm actually pretty excited. My guest, I get to say this, is sitting, I think, a few hundred miles to my south. Welcome to the comedian, magician, podcaster, and I believe creator of the Macarena. Are you still trying to?
That is correct. I'm still making that work. Yeah, I'm still trying to pull that off.
Creator of the Macarena, Eli Bosnick. Welcome to the show, man.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
So I don't normally do research on guests because I feel like that kind of steers me in a direction. But I am an Eli Bosnick fan, I should say. And I happened to come across your IMDb page, and you are,
oh my goodness,
yeah, you are a magician consultant, and like Ocean's 8, I'm like, okay, I get, but Punisher, like,
yep, the Punisher.
What the hell's that about? Like, if Frank Castle saws someone in half, I don't expect him to try to put them back together. So, like, how did that come about? Like,
so that's a super fun story. So to tell the long version, because after all, why are we here on a podcast if not for the long version?
Yeah, of course.
I have a friend who lucked into doing set design and stage management for the New York City Ballet's version of the Nutcracker.
Which every Punisher story starts with.
Yes, exactly. They all begin at the Punisher. Yeah. No, but she was like, hey, the director wants some magic this year for the uncle to do in that opening scene. So I, worked at a magic store at the time, and I've done theater consulting before. So I was like, yeah, here's a couple of things you could do. Nice favor for a friend. Worked it out, got to see it on stage. She offered us tickets. It was lovely. Didn't think more about it. 6 years later, she calls me and she's like, hey, I work for this production company that is making Ocean's 8, this new movie. We want Awkwafina to do some pickpocketing stuff and maybe like a little magic trick. Do you think you could do that? It's like, absolutely. So I show up, I teach Awkwafina, and she was, by the way, so amazing, like such a nice person, so sweet in person and so eager. And she still does that little disappearing card trick in a lot of interviews, which makes me very happy.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, so that was a great experience. They had actually hired 2 magicians for that production. One that was teaching Sandra Bullock something, and then me. And at the last minute, they switched him out for me for that second shot. So I got to work with Sandra Bullock as well. So super duper cool. While I'm there that night, I actually get to meet the director of Ocean's 8, super sweet guy. They're having a really good time. We chat. I do a couple of tricks for him, right? This sort of cast gathers around. I do a little magic for them. I don't think much of it. 2 years later, that same director is the director for the second season of The Punisher on Marvel.
Okay.
And that so I didn't even know he had my contact info. He calls me and says, hey, we got this thing. They're doing a 3-card Monty. Do you know anything about 3-card Monty? And I was like, yeah, I could show you how to shoot it. So I advised the scene where the actress throws the 3-card Monty as she's explaining what the structure of the gang is in the second season. Yeah. And that actually led to me being the magic consultant on Many Saints of Newark, the Sopranos prequel. That came out a few years ago. And so, it's just being nice to people without intention has slowly filled my IMDb page over the years.
I am telling you, like, I used to work a shit retail job, and when Inebri-art started, it was just a bunch of us sitting around drawing our sketchbooks and getting intoxicated. And then it was like, I don't know, maybe there's like money to be made and I can get out of my shit job. And it kind of floundered and didn't really go anywhere. And then I just kind of resigned to the fact I'm like, all right, I'm stuck in this shitty job, whatever. And we're just going to try to have fun and help artists get their work out and try to just have a good time. And it exploded. Like just kind of being a relaxed kind of person, as I don't always succeed at that, but just kind of like looking for those opportunities. And when someone calls, you're just like, yeah, let's do it. Who knows where it's going to go, but sure, let's do it.
Yeah, I mean and I talk to young artists quite a bit because I also teach actors at a bunch of places in and around New York. And the thing that I specialize in teaching is like transitioning into the industry for actors, right? So like, how do you get an agent? How do you get a manager? How do you actually work as an actor? And the
That
story that I see over and over again is the people who stay and work on the thing are the people who succeed, right? Overwhelmingly, right?
mm-hmm.
If someone's dad is not Dave Broadway, and that is sometimes the answer, right? You know,
Dave Broadway.
there's that amazing Onion headline, which I think about all the time, which is, all your favorite musicians' parents are blue on Wikipedia. Like, I think that's
Yep.
one of the funniest headlines the Onion's ever written. And that's definitely a part of it. But the other part of it is like every amazing thing where you're like, where the heck did this come from? Was people who were just like, no, I'm just gonna stick around and like do this every Thursday for 5 years and see if it grows and see if it forms. And from everything from like Hoffs to the Signature Theater, right? Those all started with people just being like, well, I'm gonna be the one who sticks around and creates the consistently good thing.
Yeah, and it's like to me, I'm like, it's I don't like to sit around. Um, I've been in relationships with people that just like they come home from work, they put on reruns of Big Bang Theory, they have dinner, rinse and repeat, and I'm like, that just sounds like torture. Like,
Mm-hmm.
if you're not gonna just go out and do something, whether
Right.
you're creating it, whether you're attending it, and it's one of those. The overnight success is never an overnight success. It's like the person
Right.
like I've been working
Exactly.
on this for like 8 years,
Mm-hmm.
and I just love that. When were you like that nerdy kid in school? And I can say that because I, was one. That was into magic. Did it come on later? Like,
So I actually didn't get into magic until college. I
to
started
get
magic
chicks?
yeah, yeah, just it was just for the ladies. No, I started magic in college because so when I enrolled in NYU, and this policy doesn't exist anymore, which is great, but when I enrolled at NYU, you were not allowed to do any shows, not just inside the school. Freshmen weren't allowed to do shows, but they very strongly said, hey, don't book work outside. And so for the first time since I was literally 3 years old, I was
Hmm.
not working on a show. And I was basically going stir crazy, like you were just describing, right? I had been in rehearsal for something for 15 years of my life. And the idea of sitting at home and waiting until my training was in progress to get a show was not working for me. A friend showed me a card trick. And I'm so lucky he also showed me how it was done. And a deck of cards became this little show I had in my pocket, right?
Yeah.
All of a sudden, this sort of theatrical experience that I had spent so much of my life begging for other people to let me do, all of a sudden I could do whenever I wanted, right? And still do, right? Like I always walk around with a deck of cards in my pocket. And it is because at any given moment, someone can turn to me and be like, let's have fun for 15 minutes. And I can be like, oh, yeah, no, here, I have 15 minutes of fun in my pocket. Yeah, let's do that. Right.
Yeah.
And so that really drew me. Because I came from the comedy and acting world, I also had a very different approach to magic, right? Most people, when they start magic as kids, they sort of go from magic kit to magic books to, who is famous in magic. So they have this very set path of what it means to be a magician. But because I was coming in from this place of fun, I really got to my own like unique start. And because I came from artistic communities, I noticed that there wasn't an artistic community for magicians. And this is sort of what ended up being my major contribution to magic. I started a magicians group in New York City called the Magnets,
Hmm.
which is the largest unaffiliated magicians group in the United States. So we're not part of like a national magic club. We're just like a
Okay.
group of magicians.
Okay.
And that's been around for 11 years since then. And we
Oh,
have
nice.
grown, nationally well-known performers. And we started a show in New York that lasted for 10 years until COVID shut it down. Um, and so, yeah, that sort of ended up being a community maker in magic is where I sort of ended up.
Yeah.
And what I still do today.
That's so I can relate to that so much, and I always tell people that like, oh, you have a really weird job, and I'm like, yeah, I think it's because I'm not the best artist by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm the most organized. So it just naturally became I was the one who's like, all right, everyone pay attention, put it in your
Right.
calendar. We're gonna meet back on here on this day. And so like I don't get to do as much as I like to actually draw, but it's kind of like I've looked at like that community is that's my big art project. Like
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
that
Yeah, and
network.
people can be a job as well, right? So I was recently, so I get certifications for fun because I'm a big old nerd.
Yeah.
And one of the certifications I'm working on right now is a project management certification.
Okay.
And in taking the classes that lead up to it, something that I've really loved is watching, oh man, these are skills I already had, right? I sort of thought like it was going to be like, how do you connect code to graphics and how do you
Yeah,
connect
yeah, yeah.
front end to back end? And there's been a little bit of that, but largely it's just been like, what does it mean not to manage in the sense of a Dilbert cartoon, but what does it mean to actually keep track of a bunch of people on a project towards a common goal and not put your work as someone who sees the large vision onto everybody, right? How to let someone just do the thing they're good at and then bring it to you within a time frame, and that that time frame is going to sync up with the other time frames you've set with people. So it is its own skill set, and one that you can be good or bad at for sure.
Yeah, and it's that fine line between like following up and micromanaging, you know.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that I can thank Home Depot for my skill at that. Hated my time there, but it really taught me how to really work with people I didn't like,
Yeah.
and that's unfortunately a skill I think most people are going to have to learn the hard way.
Yeah, and especially artists, right? Again, like I said, I teach young actors, and so
Yeah.
one of the challenges that I give them is I'm like, hey, just so you know, like in the public world, it really does not matter who you like or do not like.
Oh, for
Right?
sure.
You
Yeah.
watch so many TV shows about artists and they're throwing paint and brushes at each other, and the truth is like with very few exceptions of famous people who were hard to work with at the time, most of the working artists people know are lovely, and they're working artists because they're lovely.
Yeah, and it's and I think the hardest thing for artists, and you were talking about how you help them manage this, and it's been a dog's age since I went to art school, but there was no class on how to market yourself
Yeah.
and kind of how to talk to normies and you know understand that I don't care what the budget is. Well, you kind of need to,
You
like, the
gotta care
budget.
what that's where
Yeah,
all the money is. There's a
yeah,
jar and there's a certain amount in there. Yeah.
yeah,
And networking as well, right? Because and it's so funny because I talk about networking to artists and it's such a dirty word, right? Because we picture that being stuffing your business card into someone's hand against their will and sort of slimily worming your way into people's lives with these, secret goals, right?
mm-hmm.
But the truth is, networking as it actually should be used is just caring about people and asking them to be part of your inner circle,
Yeah.
right?
And when they ask you, you say yes. Like, to me, that's
Yes,
the other thing.
exactly.
Yeah.
And reaching out and keeping contact. The thing that I always find so funny is like artists live in two constant and contrary states. The constant state of thinking that if they reach out to someone, they'll be bothering them and that they'll hate them forever. And also the state of wishing someone would reach out to them. And it's like, well, that's how everyone feels.
Yeah,
Right?
that's so true.
Everyone is sitting there waiting for someone to reach out and also thinking, I better not reach out because a person would hate that.
In that is especially where running a interview podcast, that was legit a thing where you're like, do I reach out to this person? Oh, that person's quote unquote too big,
Right.
and then now it's just like I'm scrolling around like, hey, I found Eli Bosnick's email. Let's shoot him. And I think my favorite, because I get a lot of PR press releases and stuff, and every once in a while one comes across my email from Tool, and I'm always like, oh, is Tool available for an interview? And I know they don't do interviews, but
Yeah.
you never know. And the one day the PR woman's like, I don't know, let me check. And then like a day later, she's like, no, I'm sorry, they're not doing press. I'm like, oh my God, she asked Maynard.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my God. Yeah, and it's just you never know. Just
and it doesn't happen unless you
yeah.
ask. And this idea that asking is some uncouth, rude thing that's going to put you on a secret blacklist, right? That is so obviously an invention of bitter artists and people in power who don't want to be bothered,
Yeah.
right? So on the one hand, you have agents and managers who don't like that they get so many emails, who sort of spread around this rumor of like, well, you can email too many times. And then on the other hand, you have artists who have never reached out, who have never tried, who have created this narrative of, well, the people who reach out get punished for it. And then they inject that narrative into culture when, again, it's just widely untrue in every possible world, right? Even in podcasting, right? And this is something we've talked about. Like, I guest on shows generally that reach out to me, and we have people on our shows generally who either I like their stuff or they reach out to me. A ton of the guests we've had for the first time have either been me doing research and saying, okay, who's in the movie category, right? Who we think we would get along with, who we think we would do well. Just me sitting down and listening to podcasts and going, oh, these people are funny. I'd love to have them. Or someone who said, hey, did the exact same thing to me. Hey, we are a podcast and we think you did a phenomenal job. And like, we think we'd have a great time, over on D&D minus, which is our actual play show that we do, which is much, much smaller. We have some friends whose show is called
As Eli tries to think.
Yeah, this is why it helps to have the ability to do editing. Oh no, what are they called? Oh no, this is the worst. I feel so bad. All right, we have friends. I'm gonna think of it and I'm gonna scream it. I'm gonna scream it 1,000 times. All right, wait, sorry, I'm so sorry. Here, I don't know if you're gonna edit this. If you're not editing this, I am so sorry.
That's up to my editor, and I feel like he's not going to.
Okay, well, apologies to the editor in advance for.
Don't do that. Don't. My editor is like your Heath. So
okay, fantastic.
Don't be nice to him. It makes him feel uncomfortable.
All right, yeah. So we have friends in podcasting called the Gimme Dilute podcast, and they're actually a little bit bigger than we are. At least I think so. In the D&D actual play world, but they just reached out. Their DM reached out and said, hey, we do these things called fight nights where we, fight our characters against other characters, which A, amazing idea, and B, like, seems like a super fun activity, right?
Yeah.
And so we ended up doing it with them, and they got some of our listeners, and we got some of theirs, and we had this really beautiful connection. And again, that only happened because someone didn't think to themselves, oh, these guys don't want me to reach out. Right. Someone said to themselves, yeah, I have something to offer. And I think that's really what it comes down to, right? Is I think deep down, artists feel like they don't have anything to offer to the people they want to reach out to. And realizing, and again, this is going to sound so hippy dippy and wooey, but I say it to my students all the time. I say, give the gift of you, right? To people.
Yeah, that's pretty hippy dippy.
It's pretty hippy dippy wooey, but like the truth of the matter is like, until you are willing to give the gift of you to new people, you're not going to be able to incorporate them or to have them be a part of your artistic circle.
Yeah. I just want to jump back because I actually have a real question.
Sure.
I actually have a real question. Stupid thing for me to say. But
my God, what have we been doing up till now?
Just bullshitting like normal. So I think I was listening to you on Cara Santa Maria's podcast. You're interviewing her for 400, which was a total like gear shift because I'm used to like zany Eli, and I'm like, I'm so serious.
I know.
Yeah, well behaved. Nice work. But you mentioned a fourth podcast, something about dads. Like, what is that? Like, I'd never heard of that.
So I have another show called Dear Old Dads, which is me and Thomas Smith from the Opening Arguments podcast and Tom Curry from the Cognitive Dissonance podcast. And we get on, and that's a slightly more serious show, although there's definitely comedy in there, where we talk about being dads and what it's like to be fathers and how we were raised by very different fathers. Thomas's dad was sort of like an abusive narcissist, recluse, and Tom's dad is sort of like an old-fashioned sort of boomer, straighten up and fly right, but who was there for him in times of need because Tom had a really awful mother, and I had pretty great parents. And so speaking not just as how we're raising our children differently, but also how we were raised differently. And that's sort of what that show is.
Oh, about. That's cool. I'll have to give that.
And also we answer, am I the assholes? Occasionally we just get stuck on an am I the asshole?
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll have to give that a listen because I didn't even know that existed. And then I think that Cara listed that amongst your credits, and I'm like, what?
Yeah.
How did I not hear of that? Yeah, I'll have to give that a listen. And very cool. Like, to me, I think I have two children, and they're just the best, you know.
Ooh, how old?
So my youngest just turned 20 the beginning of this month, and my oldest turns 22 in like 2 weeks.
20 and 22. You look very young for someone with 20 and 20. Or you had children.
Why, thank you, Eli. No, I am pretty old. I had them not late, but fair. You know, I was probably in my 20s. I'm about to turn 50 next year. So, yeah, I get that a lot. People are either like, "Oh, you look good for your age." They're like, "Wow, you really got a Santa Claus beard going on there." And I'm like, "Yeah, fucking."
But it's scary. But now that the beard is in, right? Because
Yeah.
as someone who I was sporting a beard, probably not that length, but pretty close.
Yeah.
As someone who sported a beard post COVID, the nice thing is because it's in, they're like, "Well, you're either old or stylish as fuck."
Yeah.
And so you get that get nice benefit. Yeah. Everyone always thinks I am substantially older than I am. Right? Because they look at me and they're like, "Oh, wow, you're like 58 and you've been through several wars." And I'm like, "No, I get it.
Yeah,
I get it."
Since we run events, and a lot of times we're at breweries, so they're always like, "Oh, you're the brewer," and you're like, "No, it's just a beard, man. Like,
it's just a beard." But
yeah, it's just a beard. I don't do
they do assign you that when you brew for a long enough.
Yeah,
the ninth cask of honey mead you make, they actually grow it on your face for you. It's all
so it's just COVID laziness. I get laid off from my real job, and I'm like, I never have to shave again. And
that's right.
Really, what happened?
How it started for me as well.
So you first came across my radar along with Noah and Heath because I am, I don't know, a proud atheist. I don't know. It's weird. It's very fascinating being an atheist. I do not live in an overly religious area, but even just, I remember there was someone that I was just comparing, like, "Oh, what podcast are you listening to?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm listening to this running one," and blah, blah, blah. And I'm going down the list, and I was like, "Oh, I listen to the Atheist Experience." And it was just like, almost like, "Oh, all right, have a good day." And I'm like,
yeah, you feel like, the record scratch.
Yeah. And I'm like, what happened?
And the fact about atheism that I always quote to people that I think is a really good summary of the atheist experience, not the podcast, but the experience of being an atheist, is they did a study, and I think it was 1997, where they asked people, would you rather live next to a convicted child molester or an atheist? And 70% of Americans were like, "Give me the child molester. That guy doesn't have a Christmas tree." Yeah, exactly. Because the thing about atheism, right? Like, because I truly believe 99% of the people you meet are atheists, right? In the way we define it, right? Which is that they don't like actually believe in God or any of the things that God means, right? But I think the vast majority of people don't feel like saying that in the same way that, like, you don't ever want to shout, like, "I guess not all brides are beautiful" at a wedding, right? Like yeah,
that baby
not
is
all
ugly.
Brides, right? Kids kind of, right? It falls into that category of like rude thing, because for us, and I think this is the benefit of being sort of post-enlightenment, God is no longer a source of morality, right? It's a source of comfort. And so it feels real weird to professionally or even personally take away what most people associate with comfort, right? When I tell people I have a show called The Scathing Atheist, a lot of people are like, "Oh, you're the scathing blankie stealer," right?
Yeah.
Well, I go around, it's not healthy for kids to have blankies, so I just rip them out of their clawing hands, and they cry. They do cry. But then, then they don't have blankies anymore.
They get over it. Yeah.
Right. I think as atheism has merged more with social justice, and as people realize, like, oh shit, because everyone's like, "Oh, cool, I want to be a social justice advocate." I think as more people realize, like, oh, the roots and the money behind all the social justice stuff I care about is religion, that's when the atheism piece clicks for people. right? When they realize like, oh, right, all the transphobia and all the murder and all the homophobia and all the racism is being actively and directly funded by religion. That's when they're like, oh yeah, it might be good to put the blankie down. this blankie appears to be made out of racism, and so that's what we try to do on Scathing Atheist and the show that you enjoy, God Awful Movies, is sort of show people where the poison in those, I'm going to continue to use the blankie metaphor, to show people where the poison and the danger in those things are, so that they can put them away. Or if someone has put them away, to feel comfortable and to feel seen and to feel understood. Because like you said, right, so many of these conversations we end up having, we sort of dance around religion. Something that I had recently. So we are in public school with my son now. And one of the moms in his class, she uses a phrase I had not seen before, which is look at God, right? And it means like, look at all the lovely things God does. And the way you and I would
look
use
at the
it
trees
is,
kind of thing.
Yeah, but it means it in the sense of like, oh, great news, or like, oh, that's awesome. Is how she used it. So I'd be like, oh yeah, no, we're going on vacation. We got a really good deal on the vacation package. And she'd be like, look at God. And I kept being like, who? What, ma'am? Where am I supposed to be looking? Right. Or I want her to tell me bad news so that I can be like, yeah, look at God. Am I right? You must have pissed him up. But like, I think if you are a non-religious person, you spend a lot of your life dancing around that. And so what our shows often do for people is they just let them know like, hey, you're not crazy. You're sharing an experience with a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah, and it is. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. It is. I think people have a hard time equating luck to just coincidence,
right?
It's if it's not God, then it's like, oh, I was wearing my lucky underwear that day or whatever. Like they need that kind of blankie that like this wouldn't have happened if not for insert blankie here.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you got to name drop Sandra Bullock early. I'm gonna name drop someone, and you're gonna be super jealous. Are you ready for this?
I'm so ready. I've never been more ready.
So we were trying to put on a Comic-Con at a brewery, and through long story short, it didn't happen, but it'll happen eventually. And I was booking a cosplaying Mario group that would do like a kid-friendly magic show. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, in order to book the group, you have to talk to Mario and doing the cosplay thing. You're like, oh, hey, Scott, nice to meet you. He's like, oh, Mario. And you're like, no, you're Scott.
You're a grown person. Stop it.
Yeah. And so through a long conversation, he is a writer and has written a movie called oh my god, now I'm gonna totally blank on it. The Rectifier.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, and
the writer of The Rectifier is a fellow magician. I love that.
Yes, and I have his cell number, and I was just like, oh my god, I have heard of your movie. He's like, you have it? I'm like, oh, probably not in a way that you want to know.
Yep.
And he's like, what do you mean? I'm like, I listen to god awful movies and like, well, the budget and blah blah blah. I'm like, no, I get it, man. Like, that's cool. But he is also currently crowdsourcing for a new movie. And I can't wait for you guys to review.
I can't wait for it either. So this is something we don't get talked about a lot, is like we get reached out by movie makers on a pretty regular basis who are like,
really?
Do you want me to come on and talk about my movie? And we're like, nope, this is not what we do. And so when they're like
the Christian people will reach out.
Yes. And look, when they're homophobes or bigots, we have a very standard sort of go fuck yourself email that we send, assuming Noah doesn't get to it first and then they get a personalized one. But if Tim gets to it first, there's sort of a standard like, hey, it's not an interview show. It's a roast show. We obviously don't want to bring you on to roast your own movie. So
yeah, we don't want to make you cry.
Right. We just try not to make terrible art that hurts people in the future or something like that. But we also have people who just kind of made Christian-ish movies, right? Like it's a romance movie. And at various points, people are like, I know God sent me your way. And so one of the best circumstance around that is this guy made this romance movie we watched relatively early. Someone tweeted about it, and then the director was like, because the joke we made was like, the date of the five senses isn't real. And he was like, it is real. We should go on a date of the five senses. So we almost went on a date of the five senses with a Christian movie maker, which I would have really liked.
That would have been amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is easily one of my favorite podcasts to listen to.
Oh, I'm so glad.
And it makes, because we travel, usually in the car for about an hour or so to go to an event. So it's kind of like that perfect length.
Mm.
And my editor and business partner is like, why would anyone be a patron to the show? And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, this is a funny show. He goes, no, the ads are some of the best parts.
Oh, we really appreciate that.
Oh, yeah. You guys crush the ads. They're so much fun.
Yeah, no, when we first took on advertisers, we all sat down and we were like, we have to do this right, because they're the bane of podcasting.
Yes.
Right. Is like those same host read boring ads, and they can be done better. They should be done better. It's just pure laziness. But yeah, we've written probably 50 sketches about HelloFresh at this point. But
but Eli, what's HelloFresh?
Oh, now we got to put you on the board. Oh, man.
Yeah.
All right.
That's the whole reason why I emailed you.
That's right. This has all been a lie. You pull off your beard and you're just Heath underneath trying to get an extra point. He got me.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to derail. I just really wanted to do that.
But yeah, that's really important to us.
Yeah, and it seems like, I feel like when you do stuff like that, certain sponsors are like, yes, it goes from just being an ad to being part of the show. Like, the fact that Sparkle Donkey still takes your phone calls.
They love us, man. The first time we did a thing for them, we weren't sure how they were going to enjoy that, right? Because I was like, hey, we got to keep it wacky, right? We're not just going to straight deliver. And they were at the show where we first started doing the Sparkle Donkey jokes, and they were laughing and loving it more than anybody. They come up afterwards and they were super duper wonderful about it. And the truth of the matter is, we have sold them so much tequila because they're just people are like, all right, I got to get one of these. I got to figure this out. Yeah. So,
that's part of it is you guys, I think, connect with your audience in such a phenomenal way to the detriment of your guests. I mean, how many reviews has Kara's book gotten that says Kara does 9/11?
Yes, 20 something. Yeah. 20 something reviews for her book about 9/11. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's just such a fun. You can't package that. That's the kind of thing that a CEO is like, oh, we want to get that kind of involvement with our audience, but you just can't do it in a formulaic way. It just has to it goes back to being, just a cool, likable person.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't be a dick. So why do you torture yourself with, I love bad movies.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I am a bad movie fan.
There are some, though, that you guys have reviewed. Are there ones that are so bad that you won't put them on the show?
No, we've never watched a movie so bad we won't put it on the show, because often the worse a movie is, the better it is to watch. The only movies that we ever reject are movies that are either too long for us to reasonably turn it around in a week. Mm-hmm. There's a David Icke documentary called Oblivion that I believe is 18 hours long. Ugh. And several people have been like, you should do Oblivion. And I'm like, not in a single week. I can't. I cannot do 9 episodes worth of content in a single week. But the badness of a movie often makes it better. So yeah.
So is there potential too good of a movie? Because you guys have done some fairly notable.
Yeah, there are a couple of movies we've passed on. I'll tell you, Silence was pretty hard to do. The Oscar award-winning Martin Scorsese movie about the missionaries in, I believe it was Japan. That was pretty tough to do. Yeah. I've never particularly cared for the 10 Commandments with Charlton Heston, although Heston was such a piece of shit, we could probably have fun with that.
Oh yeah.
And it's an old-fashioned movie, but There are great movies that kind of sort of involve religion that we stay away from because there's so many awful movies that we can do instead.
Oh, the day you introduced me to the Bible, the Badge, and Bigfoot.
Oh yeah, we're doing this. So I don't know when this comes out, but next week when we're talking Thursday, May 23rd, we are doing the sequel, which just came out called Bigfoot Grip of the Monster. So
no way. Oh, all right. I'm gonna have to watch that.
Oh yeah, the Wright family.
Yeah, they're so is there ever any guilt as far as you're a creative person and you're trying to like foster other creative people, and this is a creative person that was raised differently. Like I don't feel like people choose to be religious bigots. They tend to just end up like raised in that environment. I could be, maybe I'm broad stroke here, but is there any guilt where like this person is trying to be creative and they're
so for us it's mostly about cleansing the poison for people who need the poison cleansed rather than the creators, right? So like people are always like, what would you do if you ran into Ray Comfort? And I'm like, or what would you do if you ran into David A.R. White? And I was like, I would be polite and end the conversation as quickly as possible because I don't want to talk to him. Right.
Before he realizes who I am.
Right. Exactly. Our shows are for our audience. Right. Yeah. And most of the time, our audience are left leaning people who, if they haven't directly been traumatized by religion, and that's a lot of them, but if they haven't been directly traumatized by religion, live in a world that has been wildly traumatized by religion. So our review show is not about making the creators of those films feel bad. It is about pointing out the bad ideas in those movies in a humorous way so that people can feel less alone. Yeah. Right. And so one of the pieces of feedback we get quite a bit is like, I watched, the Thief in the Night series as a kid. My church group would show it to me and it scared me so much. Or we have an older listener who like was shown If Footmen Bother You, What Will Horses Do when he was a kid in church group, which for those of you who don't know is a Christploitation film where communist atheist leaders cut off people's heads and ask children whether Jesus will give them candy. So, these things were really...
I love when you explain it and like, if I didn't know better, I'd be like, that's not real.
Yeah. No, every byline feels like I'm having a stroke as I start speaking. Yeah. But, a lot of these were like poisonous, dangerous, scary things for people. And so listening to our show cleanses the poison from them. Right. And lets people laugh at the thing that once scared them. Right. It's why I love horror movie review podcasts so much, especially comedy ones, is because like, I was scared by like Chucky as a kid so badly. And I know it's super funny because we think of Chucky as sort of this very tongue-in-cheek film, but like it was the first horror movie I saw. It scared the dickens out of me. And so listening to comedians make fun of it later in life, it's very cathartic. And I think that's the purpose we serve with our show most of the time. And very, very occasionally there will be someone so poisonous that I'm like, yeah, if they read this or if they find out about this review and they feel bad about themselves, I'm actually fine with that. If someone's that much of a bigot or an asshole,
I think I'll send them a link. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, we just reviewed Greg Locke's movie "Come Out in Jesus' Name."
Oh my god, that was
Greg Locke is sort of a famous bigot,
which is funny because I don't know. I just listened to that the night before, and I'm totally unfamiliar with him.
Yeah, that sounds great. Oh man, that's awesome. But yeah, Greg Locke is sort of famous for defying COVID lockdowns and homophobia and anti-abortion stance. And so like, if I found out that Greg heard the review and felt bad, I'd be like, good, you should feel bad. You should, the world should be a little harder for you to be the thing you are, right?
Yeah.
Regardless of the fact that like, we're all made of the atoms we're made out of and there's no free will. Like, I would like those atoms to feel bad. I would like those atoms to have the conscious experience of not doing and being the right thing.
That's awesome. And it was a great episode too. How did was there a conversion with you? Like, did you grow up religious? I grew up in like a Catholic family, I went to CCD. I was confirmed. I never went to church, which is, I feel, very Catholic. But I don't ever remember a time where I believed specifically.
Right.
I just remember like being like, this is something I'm being forced to do and whatever.
Right. I think for most people, religion starts out as a boring thing they're forced to do. And then they hit some level of teenagehood or adulthood, depending on your family, where your family goes, hey, we don't have to do that thing anymore. And
Mm-hmm.
then I think that next step into atheism usually comes when you recognize the harms of religion and you're seeking social justice outlets and you find the atheist movement. And the atheist movement is like, yeah, no, we are trying to destroy the root of the problem here. We're trying to stop the problem. For me, I grew up very religious. I grew up Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
I was just kind of sort of lay Jewish, Reformed Jewish until my bar mitzvah. So I am from Binghamton, New York, where the largest Chabad house that's associated with a university in the world is Rabbi Aaron Slonim and Rifki Slonim there. And so I sort of grew up weirdly Reform inside a Hasidic environment, which was wonderful. I had just an absolutely wonderful experience there, and I was encouraged to ask questions and learn things for myself, and had an amazing religious experience, which made me pretty devout until college. And then in college, way back in the early YouTube days, I saw
Okay.
a cartoon by a guy named Dan Meth, who had illustrated a version of Carl Sagan's Pale Blue Dot.
Okay.
And if you are not familiar with Carl Sagan's Pale Blue Dot, there is a sentence in there, and it literally like lightning bolt levels of hit me. He says, "On that pale blue dot are kings and generals, thousands of confident religions." And when I heard that term, thousands of confident religions, I just sort of had a moment where I was like, right, they all think it's true.
Yeah.
That probably means it's not, huh?
They all
Like
think
that
it's
that
true.
moment of
Yeah.
perspective that speech gave me of realizing, from however many bajillion miles away, we are just this pale blue dot with all these people convinced they know the secrets of the universe. I realized we probably don't. And then yeah, I think I went down a pretty typical like atheist activist rabbit hole, which is I started watching YouTube debates, which were very
Mm-hmm.
popular. And I know young people find those very cringy today, but that was sort of
Oh, do they?
watching Christopher Hitchens and Sam Harris and our wonderful friend Matt
Matt
over at the
Dillahunty?
Atheist Experience.
Yep.
Yeah, Dillahunty over at the Atheist Experience. Defeat those arguments in debate, which when you're a young, confident person who thinks in those terms can be very useful for you sort of deconstructing those ideas yourself. And then I did some reading and then honestly running into my coworkers and their emphasis in social justice, right? Because I think the reason Scathing Atheist has done as well as it has done over the years and continues to grow, while atheism very often can feel outdated or irrelevant. And I don't think that's true, but like I think that's the mythos around it is like, nobody wants to hear these arguments defeated anymore. I think that's untrue for a lot of reasons, but I think one of the reasons why we have often had mainstream appeal is because Noah and my co-host Heath really started their show to talk about the social justice implications of theocracy
Mm-hmm.
rather than just your grandma's wrong. And so as I have done that, and your grandma is wrong, right? But as I have done that job and realized how interconnected religion is to the harms that so many of my fellow liberals care about, it has maintained my enthusiasm, right? Because I think the reason why a lot of people are sort of like atheists but don't talk about it or aren't passionate is they're like, why? Why would I talk about this, right? Why would
Mm-hmm.
I advocate for this? This isn't like gay rights or trans rights or, the war in Ukraine where I sort of feel like there's something to be done, right? And I think when you connect to the atheist movement and realize how much there is to be done, you have this sort of like, oh my gosh, I can do so much good work here
Yeah.
moment. And that's how I still feel.
Yeah. And it's like I feel like I did the same thing. I listened to a ton of debates. I mean, I was much older. I wasn't in college, but I think I did it to kind of better understand and be able to. One of my biggest things, and I find this with religion, politics, whether you should put pineapple on pizza, is you ask someone their opinion and they have no problem stating their opinion, but then if you go, yeah, but why? their whole life gets derailed.
Right, exactly.
You know, and so I didn't want to be that person. So I started watching those debates, and I found that it's almost like watching, you know, a stand-up bit over and over again. It like the debates don't change. The rat, it's like, oh, this is straw man. Oh, this is, you know, Pascal's wager. It there's nothing new. There's no new debate. It's just like listen, the same guys say the same thing over again. You're like, I've seen it, and I think that's why I enjoy your show. It comes at it from a different angle, and you're right. It is so much more about, like, if someone was just like, I like, you know, to believe that I have an imaginary friend in the sky, you'd be like, cool, I don't have a problem with that. But when you're like, and he wants to enact all these laws, then you're like,
yes,
okay, exactly. Hang on. Like that, to me, that's always the problem.
Yeah.
And you know, my youngest is non-binary, so to me it is even heightened more because I want them to have a good life and to have the same rights that everyone else should have. And you know, so it just becomes like, it wasn't a big deal when it was like, I'm straight white suburban guy. I have it's world's made for me.
Right.
So, but exactly. Like when it comes to my kid, now I'm like, okay,
those systems rock out for us. Yeah, hardcore. Yeah.
Like credit score, who cares?
Patriarchy?
Like,
oh, that sounds great.
yeah. Like whatever. Be like, yeah, that's probably wrong for you guys. But it really like zeroes in when it's like your kid, and you're like, okay, now I have the something to fight for. I have a horse in the race now.
Yeah. And I think that is the case for so many people, is that like religion always comes for you eventually. Right. Is the thing that so many people have discovered, whether it is queerness or racism or, you know, anything, truly any issue that you become passionate about changing the world for the better, fucking tax laws. Right. Eventually you run into the hard wall of like religion making the world worse. And when we have that personal connection like that, we realize like, ooh, okay, your imaginary friend is a problem, right? You know, I think it was Daniel Dennett who wrote, you know, no one has a private God, right? Yeah. Gods by definition must be public.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And so like, I think that's something really interesting, is that like, we are often presented with like, yeah, but if I just like have my own personal beliefs, that's fine. And I'm like, sure. But I bet if we had a 4-sentence conversation, your God all of a sudden has opinion about other people. And to this day, having been a professional atheist, no one's ever been like, nope, my God is totally secret and does not enforce on anyone else's life. Right.
And it's like, you know, okay, so you think it's cool to institute this law based on your religion that you agree with, but you know, bear in mind, like, keep going down the line, there's a religion that's going to be like, I think caffeine is wrong, you know?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
If you let them legislate religion, eventually you're gonna be like, wait, I didn't mean that, you know?
Yes, exactly.
So.
And that is so often the case, right? And that's what the Satanists point out so well often, is like, there'll be an after school club that's Christian, and then the Satanists come in and they're like, great, after school Satan club. And they're like, wait, no, no, I meant me.
Yeah. And why is that one way more popular?
Yes, exactly. Man, they got coloring books. Damn.
Yeah. That's so funny. Where do you see I'm gonna assume when you were a kid you were like, I'm gonna be a professional podcaster.
I definitely did not know.
Like, where do you see it going? Like, what's Eli, what does Eli want to be when he grows up, I suppose?
So, you know, I love my job, and I am in a place where if I did exactly what I do now for the same people, same amount of people, and the same amount of money, I would consider myself to have one of the luckiest lives a human being could have. Right. And so for us right now, where our focus is how can we give back? How can we help others? And how can we spread this luck around? So our focus as a show right now is less on growth and making more money. Although I do say this during May, which is our fundraising month.
So, you know? Apparently exactly. Eli's having problems with his house.
That's, exactly. I had a column replaced in my bag. I could do another hour-long podcast about that. But the idea of having people being able to share that luck, right? How do we have newer podcasters on the show? How do we turn up the volume on minority voices and less heard voices? How do we bring diversity into our community? And how do we support people doing the hard and unthanked work of atheism? One of the things that we do every year is we go to, at American Atheists Convention, the Recovering from Religion Foundation. They do a little presentation on the work they've been doing that year. And if you're not aware of Recovering from Religion, they are people who help people escape religion. And not you and me, right? Who we were just sort of like, oh, I guess that's not true. I'll watch some fucking Christian. But people who are in like devout environments, or people who have firm philosophical ties to their religion and feel really lost without it.
Them.
Right. Families can ostracize you, sometimes professional religious, members of the clergy, all that. And Recovering from Religion provides a space and a 24/7 hotline for those people. And hearing the stories of the people they have helped, and hearing the people who have gotten community when they've been at their lowest, right? So now that I'm as lucky a place as I am, my question for myself is like, how do I help Recovering from Religion, right? How do I help more people find out about that and use those services? How do I get them more money? Right. And so, as far as what's next is, I really want to raise the volume on other voices. I want to share this luck that I have. And I'd also like to do a New York City based atheist convention, because there isn't one. That'd be cool. Really. There was one for years, and it kind of fell off and got small. And I think a New York, or at least East Coast based atheism convention would be super duper fun. And I think it would be well worth our time. So, maybe in the next 5-10 years, you'll see Bosnick Con coming across.
Bosnick Con.
Bosnick Con. That's what when I pitch that idea to my partners, and when we talk about the possibilities of that, I just call it Bosnick Con in the hope that they will eventually call it Bosnick Con. I'm manifesting Bosnick Con into existence.
Anytime I pitch something to my business partner, I'm like, don't say no right away.
Yes. The term we have for that is I have a back of horse idea, right? Which is that usually my ideas are like, I want you guys to get into the back of this horse costume, and then I'll let you know what we're gonna do. Yeah.
I love that. That's really good. So I am ecstatic that you came on the show.
Oh my goodness, it was a blast.
And I'm really fascinated, because you're putting into context something that I've realized doing podcast, and kind of been struggling with a little bit, is so on God Awful Movies, you're kind of the zany, everyone kind of like craps on everyone else, but you're kind of like the
butt of the joke, if you will.
Yeah, but not all the time, but kind of like like if there's one person that's going to say something like totally off the, rails, it's going to be Eli. And you're so well spoken today and like thoughtful. And I'm like, wow, this is not at all where I thought this was going to go.
No.
And I'm experiencing a bit of that myself with some people who I'm like, because on some of the other shows we do, I'm kind of like, play the fool. This isn't my industry, so I'm going to play the fool. I'm going to ask the dumb question. Did you ever have that moment where you're like, hey, assholes, I am not an idiot? Like, do you feel that kind of... Podcasting is a certain amount of acting, because like you don't like, do it every day, but like, do you ever have trouble distinguishing between the two Elis, or having other people distinguish that?
Yeah, most people don't just know that there's a real Eli. I think a lot of people, because so many podcasts are just people being themselves. There's not like a character, right? Maybe there's a sense of like, well, I'll heighten my sense of humor, or I'll exaggerate slightly for comedic effect. But I think there are very few people who are like quite so character-y as I am, right? Which is truly like, there are things that I do not care about or believe that I talk about on the show that people believe. So like on the shows, I talk about how much I hate ziplining. Nothing against ziplining, nothing at all. Right?
I hate cats like professionally.
Right, exactly. It seems like
I really don't give a shit about cats, but
pleasant activity. The show Supernatural, I think I've seen 2 episodes of it. It seems fine, but like, I've talked about how much I hate it, and my wife has written a song about how much I hate it, right? Like, we have put a tremendous amount of time and effort. And so occasionally people don't know how that works. And that's sort of what goes one of two ways. The first is like someone's a Supernatural fan and they're like, why do you hate my beloved Supernatural? And I'm like, I've got good news. You're talking to the actor and I don't hate Supernatural. I just think it's funny to pretend.
Yeah.
And then the other side often is like people are like, they want to interact wackily with me when we are in a real life situation. Right. So the example I always think about, and this is such a well-intentioned person, right?
Yeah.
So like one of the things that I walk out on stage in very skimpy outfits, right? Like I'll wear just a thong or I'll wear something themed after the city we're in.
And somehow you still sell tickets.
Yes, and well, I'm telling you, I sell a lot of tickets based off this sweet, sweet bud. But yeah, I do that on stage. And I remember one time we were meeting people and they had their kids with them and they were there to see the show. And, we had this lovely conversation, right? And later the dad was just like, hey, try not to get naked in front of my kids. And I was like, oh man, the context of that is so important. It's so important that you understand the context. Everybody who's standing around in this public place,
law enforcement people who are nearby.
Yeah, exactly. But honestly, like the interactions that I've had, like not to gush about my own life too much because it feels conceited, but like the interactions I've had because of my career have been so lucky and so wonderful, right? The people I've gotten to meet and the friends I've gotten to make, like I will take all the bad, which is truly de minimis, for the mountains of good I've gotten to have.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm starting to experience that. We run a horror convention here in Plymouth, and I was walking through it talking to someone, and I laughed, and someone nearby stopped me, and he's like, hey, your voice. I'm like, what about it? He's like, you're on that show. And I'm like, what? And it was and I ran into him like I think last weekend, just out and about, and he's like, oh, just listen to the next episode. And
that's so just wonderful.
So like heartwarming. Like, it's so weird because like you're used to looking at the statistics and you're like, hey, we're big in India or whatever, but then to meet one of those numbers in real life, it's just like
it's so weird. Yeah, it's so wonderful. Yeah.
Well, you've met one of your numbers today, Eli. I'm a big fan. And,
I'm so glad to hear it.
And this interview just makes me more of a fan. You're an absolute sweet person to talk to. Welcome on the show anytime. And do you want to do the whole like plugging things? Do you want to?
Yeah. Hey, check out our shows: God Awful Movies, The Scathing Atheist, The Skeptocrat, D&D Minus, and Dear Old Dads. Wherever you get your podcasts.
Yeah, and I definitely am going to check out Dear Old Dads, and I cannot wait for the Bigfoot follow up because that's
excellent.
That's going to be great.
Right. Thanks so much.
No problem, listeners. You can check us back again next week. Again, we're moving offices. I couldn't even begin to tell you who we're recording with because it's just been kind of hectic. But Eli, again, thank you so much, and it's been an absolute pleasure.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me.
And thanks for checking out the show today, listeners. If you enjoyed the content today, you can go over to patreon.com/Inebri-art to support the show. You can join over there for just a few dollars a month and help us provide this fun content that you just checked out. You can also email us at Inebri-art.com with your questions, complaints, and concerns, or you can find us on all social medias at Inebri-art or at Inebri-art6 on Instagram. And also don't forget to check out our other shows, Bar Talk Podcast, Old Colony Cast, Inebri-art, and all the other shows on the Inebri-art Network, which you can find at Inebri-art.com. Thanks again for listening.